And good evening, everyone. This is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective. It is an initiative of World Hindu Council of America, or VHPA. I'm Ajay Shah, and I'm the president of VHPA. And with me always, as always, is Sudha Jagannathan. Sudha is a Hindu advocate, very passionate, very articulate. And Sudha, welcome back. I know you had a great excursion to Europe where you learned some exciting things. Maybe someday you can talk about it. But welcome to Hindu Lounge.
Namaste. Thank you.
So, Sudha, we have this interesting topic today. I think you have had a chance to kind of read about it. We have been all the people who are in Hindu advocacy have been looking at this issue. This is almost deja vu, right? It's coming back. Caste bills are back, but this time they're not in US. This one is in Canada, and it's not a bill, but it's a motion which is almost like saying that it's the sentiment of the House of Representatives in Canada. And they are saying about this, just about the same thing that the California bill SB 403 said, which is that caste should be a protected class. And that particular bill passed the California Assembly, it passed the California Senate, and then the governor of California vetoed it. Now, walk us through the history of this bill. For SB 403, before we go into the Canadian bill, what happened with SB 403? Why was the who introduced it? Why was it introduced? And what eventually happened with that bill?
Well, in California, the freshman senator, an Afghani refugee, Senator Aisha Wahab, introduced the bill last February in 2023. She introduced the bill as a very benign bill against discrimination. The last day before she had to finalize it, suddenly it was all about caste. It was about caste, it was about the Hindu religious system, it was about the terrible violence going on in America, all these rapes and murders and wage stiffing and all that going on. And that bill went into the first introduced into the Senate, and within 2 3 weeks it passed. And that was the first time the Hindu community came together from all over California, showed up outside the federal building, and did a rally. It was one of the biggest rallies that the legislative community said they had ever seen. And the bill got termed as a hot bill because they were getting calls, the senators, everybody. And then shortly after that, it went to the assembly. And then, as by the time it got to the assembly, the Hindus started protesting because even though the bill did not say Hindu, the bill said caste. We know in the Western world, in America, in Canada, in the Western world, everywhere, caste is uh, applied only to Hindus, right? The
Yeah.
textbooks, everywhere. Textbooks, the dictionary. You look up dictionary definition of caste. It says a Hindu hierarchical social system. So everywhere, caste is defined as Hindu, and so it went to assembly because of the community engagement. A few of the Asian the Asian AAPI leaders there stood up for us, and they tried to offer some counters to this. First was to remove the word caste, and of course the sponsor, Senator Wahab, said absolutely not. And then they asked for a study to see is this necessary in California. And again, Senator Wahab said, no need. We have all of these, records. of caste discrimination. But so it passed in the assembly. Then it went to the governor, and the governor sat on it for a month. And then he said, I don't see a need for this. Current law in California protects against all of any caste discrimination on the basis of our ancestry and national origin protected class, right? And so that was the end of SB 403 in 2023, but it can come back again. But I just want to point out before this, uh, there were a couple of things that happened in California, which became the foundation for SB 403. The first one was a caste discrimination case against Cisco Systems, and two engineers in the Cisco Systems. It started in 2020, and went through 2023. And interestingly, just before the Senate voted on this last March, on March 10th, the California Civil Rights Department withdrew the case against the two engineers. But that did not sway the legislature or the sponsor and their supporters, Equality Labs being made one of them. So the Cisco Caste case, in that case, the CRD, the California Civil Rights Department said, caste is integral to the Hindus. Every Hindu is born with a caste and goes around with a caste. And late last year, they came back and said, sorry, we were wrong, and caste is not integral to Hindu. And then this year, what happened? The CRD was sanctioned very nominally, but they have been penalized for a few $1,000s for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. These are my words, I'm just saying. So in every case, the Cisco Cas case has fallen apart completely. The other one they kept, the sponsor kept on bringing up was the temple in New Jersey, the Babs temple. But the Babs temple case was a labor issue, and the laborers supposedly who claimed caste discrimination, they all went back to India and they said, we were coerced by an Indian American lawyer in New Jersey or New York. And we withdraw our complaint against Babs. Babs, actually, our contractor and the temple treated us very well. So that case has fallen apart. But it doesn't stop the caste policing, right? And that's why we are seeing this happen in Canada. It's a motion. It doesn't include all the crap that Senator Wahab had included in the SB 403 in the first version of it. But at the end of the day, the decision in California was that this bill is not needed. So my question to the member of parliament, Don Davis, is this necessary? And my argument that it is not necessary is the fact that one of the supporters of the bill who showed up in his press release was Manoj Bhangu, who had a case taken into the Canadian courts as a caste case because he got attacked and violently attacked by a couple of people. And that caste case was prosecuted by the Canadian judicial system, and the perpetrators were punished. They had to pay a penalty to Mr. Bhangu. So Mr. Bhangu, who used the Canadian law to win justice for himself, is now saying Canada needs a caste discrimination law. It doesn't make any sense. So,
No, it does, and it's very interesting the way it is framed. The whole argument is framed, right? If you go back to the SB 403, they had added caste to the uh, definition of ancestry, and then they had said that the bill would additionally include ancestry as a protected characteristic in that policy statement would define ancestry and caste for the purposes of those provisions. So there is something called protected class, which makes bringing up a lawsuit on discrimination much easier. Ancestry is already included in that, and they said that caste is nothing but discrimination based on ancestry. Now, if you look at the history of caste, the word caste was introduced by Portuguese. It came from the word castas, and it conflates two different concepts. One of them is the Varna and the other is the Jati. Varna was always based on profession. Varna is mentioned in Rigveda, and in one of the shlokas it says that I have a different Varna than my mother, than my father, which kind of indicates that in this purest form, the Varna was not based on birth but was based on the profession that people practiced. Jati, on the other hand, was almost like a community, and a whole Jati, through the history, have migrated from one Varna to the other because the circumstances changed, professions changed, and people at one time who were traders became farmers, and farmers became rulers, and rulers became priests or whatever. So it basically was very fluid. When Portuguese came, they were familiar with the race and the word and castos, and so and when the British did their census in late 1800s, they just basically categorized the society into caste, Indian society into caste, and there were people who didn't even know what their caste was. They didn't know if they belonged to which of the caste they belonged to. Now, having said that, I also want to say that as with any society, Indian society, Bharatiya society also had discrimination. There is no going away from that. It would be disingenuous on our part to say that Indian society was perfect or fair to everyone. There was discrimination. There was also birth-based discrimination, and we acknowledge that. The question is, did this discrimination follow the immigrants who came from India to the US? We, as you mentioned correctly, and the Cisco case has fallen apart, and the BAPS case is falling apart. I cannot find an example, a documented example, which is proven in a court of law that categorically says that in America there is caste based discrimination. That is not to say that the activists have not propped up their people. So, equality labs of the world in America or the Canadian equivalents of them have not propped up their people to say that, oh, when I came to Canada or when I came to America, people discriminated me on the basis of caste. That is different. That is not the same as saying that there is a documented evidence of caste, because every time they have brought it up, somebody has brought that up, it has not withstood the challenge, it has not withstood the rigor of the law, of a court of law. So, my question is, if this purely a political play, and if it is, why are people like Equality Lab or their Canadian equivalent or friends in Canada bringing this issue up now?
you know there is no good time or a bad time for caste discrimination kind of laws or anything to against the Hindus, right? Of course, we saw a lot of noise with the recent elections happening in India, and they are actually playing that out here because in India, I believe there was a lot of political games going on the basis of caste. So that kind of boiled up in the Western world too, where they still talk about caste. The problem is exactly what you said. What happens in India doesn't happen amongst the Hindu diaspora anywhere. And the Western world just refuses to understand that, right? So when you even say the Europeans had a caste system, they did. And if you, I don't, if you remember what the late J. Lakhani in UK had said, the British royal family is the longest lasting hereditary caste system in the world. So that is their worldview. And even today, amongst the British nobility, the European nobility, caste system exists. Nobody talks about it. It's not that the society has moved forward. So they put that same lens on our community, which is a very law abiding and very successful community in any part of the world. So there is a lot of that in play, and they feel like they can get us. by throwing these, as Pandit Satish Sharma in UK says, caste bombs. So these bombs seem to explode occasionally in the US and in Canada now. But I think the Hindu community is becoming more aware about the dangers of this particular bill. Caste, first of all, is not facially neutral. What does that mean? Well, I'm looking at you, Ajay, looking at you. I know you are Ajay Shah. I can maybe say you are a Gujarati, but I don't know what your caste is. I couldn't care less. You can look at my name, Jagannathan. Oh, you must be a Tamilian. You must be a Brahmin, which I'm not. I'm not a Tamilian either. So, facially neutral means you can't, well, we know what gender we each are. We can look at each other and say that, but you cannot determine the caste of anybody by looking at that person. So it's not facially neutral. That makes it a problem. How is the Canadian government going to determine what caste somebody is, right? Who is authorized in the government? Even if it's a motion, they're making a statement that the Hindu that a certain community practices caste. Of course, this bill doesn't say Hindu. They don't have to. The caste word is always like a branding on Hindus. So, um, it's not facially neutral. And secondly, where's the data? Where's the data of rampant discrimination on caste that happens on people?
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. I think a they want to promote a colonial narrative, and the reason they want to promote this narrative is because the Hindus in America, Hindus in Canada, Hindus in North America, and West overall are successful. Because the Hindus are successful, a lot of the anti people who are anti-Hindu for various reasons, because primarily because they don't like the fact that Hindu Dharma is all welcoming. Hindu Dharma offers the freedom in spirituality that most of the other faiths do not offer. They feel threatened by Hindus. They feel threatened by Hindu Dharma. They think that a lot of their adherents are going to probably become Hindus. So how do you bring Hindus, successful Hindus, down? How do you prevent your people following a particular faith from becoming Hindus? Even though we have no tradition of proselytization or conversion, but people are threatened by the freedom, spiritual freedom that we offer, Hindus offer, and so they want to somehow or the other bring Hindus down, bring Hindu Dharma's image down. And what better way to do it than to bring out the concept of quote unquote caste and pin it on Hindus, so that the Hindus who are successful uh, are brought down. It's very simple. If they succeed, if these bills succeed, then every Hindu in every situation, whether they're doing business, they're in a corporate world, they're getting admission into colleges, every Hindu will now be marked, and we have enough data for to show that. For example, when a CEO before Elon Musk took over, Parag Agarwal was announced as the CEO of Twitter at the time. Not at that time, it was not X, it was Twitter. And the minute he was appointed CEO, a whole barrage of tweets came out which said that, look, another Brahmin appointed CEO. Now, the if you were to really go by the definition of caste, which I don't buy into, that our opponents have provided, Parag Agarwal is not a Brahmin. Uh, from his last name or from his family tradition or whatever way you count it, he was not. Uh, if you were to go by the Varna definition, maybe, because he's educated and he has a PhD and all that. But this is the kind of narrative that was spewed, that look, another corporate CEO position goes to a upper caste Brahmin, and then all of a sudden people found out that he's not, and then there's like, well, he's still an upper caste. So now every person who is Hindu, who has a Hindu name, gets a corporate position, gets success in businesses, gets admission in a prestigious university. They will say that, look, Here is another. Here is another upper caste person, because of his caste privilege, so-called caste privilege, is now getting a corporate position.
Hmm.
So what is a Hindu? What is a Hindu to do? That Hindu is going to say, "Hey, I don't want any of this. So I'm just going to go and say I'm not a Hindu." Because the minute I say I'm not a Hindu,
Exactly.
I'm
Yeah.
absolving myself from being labeled as a casteist. So the whole
Hmm.
idea is that how do you take successful Hindus and make them say, I'm not a Hindu?
Hmm.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
I agree with you. There is a bigger motive behind all of this. The fact that we still stand as Hindu, a billion Hindus in the world, is very, very frustrating to a lot of people in the world, right? And the fact that many of us, having left very hardships and very struggling lives in India, but we had solid education and we came here on meritocracy and worked hard and have become successful. Not just successful in our corporate life or whatever, successful in every field, right? I mean, look at the spelling bee. It's not a small thing. It shows hard work, dedication by parents and children, and that is the same formula for families of Hindu faith across all diaspora. We work very hard. We take pride in success, and that is why a lot of concern. Look at these people, these immigrants who came from a poor country, coming and taking over, our best companies and all that. But what these people who are concerned need to understand, especially I would say American and Canadian citizens need to understand, when the Hindus are successful in business or in any field, it helps the Canadians and Americans. It's not helping Indians, right? We
And,
serve as doctors, teachers, school teachers, and business owners and restaurant owners, to serve the communities here. We are contributing to the economies here. We are not a threat to you. Secondly, I would say very rarely do Hindus come here as refugees. The refugee Hindus are from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, etc., who have fled terrible, terrible persecution. But otherwise, we come because we have education or we have qualifications required here. No temple ever sponsors any Hindu. That's not true with our Christian communities from India. Many Christian communities are brought as whole villages to America. So we don't have those same advantages, but we still overcome all obstacles and succeed. That should be celebrated. That is an American value, right? An American tradition. Unfortunately, like I said, schools here, the academia, the media, all try to portray as uh, immigrants who come and take away things instead of contributors to the
yeah.
community. So we have a lot of work to do. We need to convince the community of who we are, how we align with American values and traditions, and that we are not a threat.
And the people who are promoting this narrative truly hate Hindus.
Yes.
One of the people who was promoting the SB 403, for example, said, uh, Hindus are sick people of India. It is in their religious books who train their minds to be sick. These are the kinds of people. Look at the impact this is going to have. Sudha, you lived in Bay Area, so you probably heard of this. That in in elementary schools they make kids play role play games on caste.
Yes.
Now teachers and administrators have gotten fired for making kids play the game of slave owners and slaves. But when they subject this same thing to impressionable Hindu kids, nobody's saying anything, and they're getting away with this.
Yeah.
And the
Except
same thing is
now.
going to happen to Canada. If
Yeah.
Canada doesn't wake up and this is not stopped in Canada, this is going to happen in Canada.
That is something the Hindu community needs to know, because this is not something that only affects some of the Hindu community. This bill or the motion, once it's passed, it paints the entire Hindu community as casteist, which means if you have a child today, that child is born, as long as the child is a Hindu, that child is born as an oppressor casteist, right?
Yes.
Is that
And
what
you're
you want
labeled
your
from
children
right
to
from your
be?
birth, you're labeled an oppressor. And
Yes.
this child, as with any, I mean, I have worked in, I've been in US for a long time. I've gone to graduate school here. I've worked here. And I can tell you, Sudha, nobody has ever come and said, what is your caste? And I don't know, what is your experience? You've been in America for a long time. In corporate America or in universities, nobody asks. Among the friends, I mean, I've lived in the smallest communities in America where there were very, very few, people from India, very few Hindus. And I've lived in states where, there Hindus and Indians are plentiful with dozens of temples. In neither of them, anyone's ever asked. I just went to, dozens, hundreds of mandirs. I traveled to the Yatratra for 20 days, right? The Yatra was 60 days. Uh, our general secretary traveled for all 60 days, and our joint general secretary traveled for 40 days. I was on the Yatra for 20 days, visited hundreds of temples in America. Not a single temple, asked me, "Oh, but before you go in, can you tell me what your caste is? Can you tell me what your varna is? Can you tell me what your jati is?" I just had a chat with our Canadian counterparts today, our sister organization in Canada today. They have traveled 25,000 kilometers, and nobody has asked them what their caste is before they go into temple. So what is this in Canada? This is not the first thing in Canada. I can show you, so that you can see this. Let me go to a couple of slides here, and I want to show you this. Uh, this we already, so they've been building this narrative in Canada for last few years, right? How caste discrimination impacts communities in Canada. Then they have this, I came here to escape, and Toronto caste-based discrimination in schools. And then they've recorded the videos of multiple people. Ontario Human Rights Commission passed this, resolution against, policy or position on caste-based discrimination. And then, I don't have it here. I don't have a slide here, but the school district in Toronto also passed the same kind of resolution. So I, on the basis of what? What is this based on? There's
I
not
want to
a
say,
single incident.
yeah.
There's nothing. There's no evidence. So other than to point, or to paint Hindus as, discriminatory from birth, what other purpose is this serving?
I agree. So Toronto School Board, um, uh, had the debate, and in that debate, I think we should all go watch that video of the debate, where a couple of the board members challenged the supporters of the caste bill and said, "Where's the data?" And they said, "Well, we don't have data, but if once we pass this, we hope to get a lot of data." Right? So my point is that this is just an exercise in profiling, and I want to give you a little bit of context. We have to look at Canada. A century ago, in 1923, they passed the Chinese Immigration Act, which was really to stop the Chinese from immigrating to Canada, right? 1923. But
Yeah.
earlier than that, in 1905, both Canada and America formed the Asiatic Exclusion League to prevent people from Asia coming to America. In 1907, the Bellingham riots happened. Bellingham is a city, northernmost city in the state of Washington, on the border of Canada and the US. About a 500 group of a mob of about 500 white people came with sticks and all sorts of things, attacking the Hindus and the Sikhs working in the lumber mills. A lot of them got killed and many fled. across the border into Canada. But going into Canada did not really protect them. There were riots wherever they went in Canada. So Canada has had a long history of discriminating against Asians. Okay. And today I call this bill M128 motion. It's not a bill, it's a motion as the Hindu Exclusion Act. Okay, this is Canada's record. So it's very very hard to explain why these things happen, but unfortunately it is supported today by people of color, by people from Asia, by Indians, for whatever reasons they want to push this narrative. And maybe it has to do with a lot of money behind it. We have seen exposés of who Equality Labs is, and many of that. The same thing I'm sure works in Canada. There's a lot of money behind this profiling exercise. When I say profiling, just want to say, if this motion passes, like if there is a legal a law that comes into place on caste, what it does is it ghettoizes, it puts the Hindus in a separate category that says these people are so horrible, so oppressive, they need special laws in the civilized Western world so they behave well. Are
Yeah,
we
and
that
then think of the
atrocious?
impact it has, Sudhas. Think of the impact it has on a kid who is going to middle school, elementary school, middle school, high school. That kid is going to be bullied. That kid is going to be beaten up, and that kid is going to carry the scar all his or her life. And think of the impact it has on the person who works on 7-Eleven. Think of the impact is that it has on the person who works in a motel. Now, I'm not worried about the impact on, I mean, there's going to be a blatant discrimination against people who work in academia, not so much on in the corporate world. In corporate world, of course, there'll be job opportunities lost by a lot of people who are Hindus, because people, just as uh, with as with any program, a hiring manager, and we have already seen the evidence of that in Cisco case. A hiring manager makes a decision on hiring someone based on merit or experience or something like that. All of a sudden they are open to criticism that, hey, look, this hiring is based on caste, so that we already know. But these are the unknown, unseen impacts on a kid who is in high school,
Mhm.
on a person who works in 7-Eleven, and a person who works in a motel. How are you going to stop that? Because you've already vilified these people. You've already said that these people are horrible. You already said these people are discriminatory and privileged. And in today's environment, if you're privileged and if you're considered discriminatory, you're open to all kinds of repercussions, and
Mhm.
nobody is out there to protect you.
Exactly. That's a message I think the Hindus who say, I support the bill. In California, we had some of the tech guys who said, with a sad heart, I have to support the bill. They did not understand what they were doing. They were actually condemning well behaving Hindus, who have never done this kind of stuff, to a hellhole. Like I said, a ghetto that says every Hindu is a criminal,
Yeah.
right?
And Canada is anyway hostile to Hindus.
Yes, they're hostile to Hindus. They're saying, Hindu Canadians, get out of here. And now
Right?
this is
You've
one
seen
more
the
reason.
signs. There were Hindus that were beaten up, physically beaten up. Canada has been hostile to Hindus for last few years, especially because at the highest level, from the prime minister down, the government is hostile to Hindus, and they
Yes,
encourage the anti-Hindu, you know, elements in the Canadian society to depict the murders and violence against the Hindus in the floats and other places, uh, in the parades and the floats and the posters and all of that. They blatantly show violence against Hindus. uh,
yes,
a One of the largest terrorist attacks in Canada, which was the downing of an Air India plane. I mean, the you know people. celebrate the terrorists over there, and nobody says anything about it.
Hmm.
All the
So
terrorists who have fled from India, who reside now in Canada, and they spew anti-Hindu venom, and there is no uh, anti-India venom, anti-Hindu venom, and there's no repercussions. And in that environment, if you bring this bill, what would happen to Canadian Hindus who are, going to little kids who are going to school?
I feel for them, I have to say, unless the parents prepare them enough. And I want to let you know that good news in California, what we saw was parents started to intervene in schools when the children would come and say, our teacher is having us do this caste game. The parent went in and said, this is nonsense. And the school said, okay, the class teacher said, okay, I will not do this thing. And in one other situation, we had a student say, um, my class teacher called me by name and said, what's your caste? And the kid froze. Can you imagine a seventh grader? But the teacher thought every Hindu knows his or her caste, and it's very common. It is normal to know that. The teacher did not understand how traumatic it was for this child to be called out and say, what's your caste? And the kid didn't know. So the schools are, I mean, Americans and Canadians are not understanding the impact of this, how this is as bad as slavery being taught or the slave games being taught, and an African American child is asked to play the role of the slave, and a white person asked to play the role of the master. How horrible it is, right? So we need to protect our children. I think I'm asking all Hindu parents in Canada to stand up and start fighting this. And once again, we are not standing for discrimination.
Correct.
Nobody, no
And
Hindu
we
is
are
to.
not saying that any society, including the Indian society or the Hindus as a community, are fair or have always been fair, any of that. All we are saying is today in North America, there's absolutely no evidence of caste discrimination that has been proven anywhere.
Yes.
That's all we are saying.
That's all we say. And also in the Western world, we have to remember the word caste is uniquely tied to Hindus. And it is taught over and over again in schools, in school textbooks, in academic materials, in the media, that caste is Hindu. That is wrong. That is not what the Hindu has said. It is what the Western colonizer and the missionaries have said. So you are actually perpetrating, continuing to project a
Yes.
colonizer's version of what caste system is on the Hindu diaspora in the West, which is absolutely wrong. You have no right to do that. You know, we have rights under the Constitution of Canada and America to practice our religion and follow the rules of this country. And if following the rules of the country is somehow causing you heartbreak, come and talk to us, all right, and
Yeah.
ask us to collaborate with you in any kind of discussions on how we really need to tackle the problems of the country. Caste discrimination is not the biggest problem in this country. Racial discrimination is. And I was just looking at this one article that said serious race problem in the Toronto School District Board. This was in 2021. And then what do? They don't solve that. They go try to solve a
Well, because
non-existent.
this is for many people, this is a low hanging fruit.
Mhm,
There are vocal anti-Hindu people in the Greater Toronto area, and it's a place. There's a confluence of a lot of uh, people who hate Hindus in one concentration of all of them in one place, and they've gotten together and they've decided that why not exercise a little bit of political muscle and bring Hindus down. And if we set good enough of precedents, we can bring Hindus down, not just in Canada, in Toronto area, but all over Canada, and not just Canada, but all over North America, and not just North America, but all over the Western world. And
Yes.
so this is, in some ways, a uh, a test case after the California experiment failed, and it would be, interesting to see if the Canadian politicians take a leaf out of the Newsom playbook and say, look, or Newsom's thought process and say, look, I mean, there is really no caste discrimination in North America. This is, this has to be recognized as what it is, which is ancestry based discrimination of Hindus, and it has to be recognized as uh, nothing but an attempt to, you know politically score, exercise of political muscle. That's what it is. That's all it is.
That is all it is. Yeah. But it has a very serious harm, and it is in perpetuity. These things don't have a expiration date. So when Burnaby City Council, the Toronto School Board, it's in their rules and regulations permanently, which is serious problem. You know, unless the Hindu parents get Hindu community start to get engaged, show up in city councils, counter this, push back, engage. Civic engagement is now. The need for civic engagement is right now.
So, Sudha, I have a quiz question for you. A quiz. When did Seattle City Council pass its, was it at least a year and a half ago or so? They
I
passed
think
their,
they did it in February of 2023.
yeah,
Shortly after
about a
that,
year.
Aisha Wahab
About year and
passed.
3 months, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so my quiz question for the day for you is, they allocated, that they allocated over $100,000. They gave them permission to manage
$185,000.
to identify caste discrimination in Seattle. So they get all their buddies a job and all that, right? Out of that, so 150,000 to whatever amount of money they allocated. So the quiz for the day is, how many cases did they find in last year and 3 months?
I'd say zero.
You pass.
But let's do the counter thing in California. What was the recent report that said, uh, based on the California hate crimes hotline, uh, here is a ranking of the biggest discrimination. Name the three if you can.
I think Hindu was number two.
Yes. Anti-Semitism was number one. Hindu phobia was number two. Islamophobia was number three.
That's right. And we did the show, right? One of the early shows that we did together, we actually showed the data and we said Hindus don't even go and report. And
Yeah.
even after such a huge underreporting, if we are at number two in as in terms of people who are being persecuted, discriminated against, bullied, all of that, then there was if there was an appropriate reporting of this, where would we be? Probably the most discriminated in California, right?
Yeah. I also want to point out that as soon as the Cisco Caste case was launched, several Bay Area tech companies are at Caste as protected category,
Yeah,
including Cisco Systems,
yeah.
which really violates the rights of Hindu employees in those companies. But no Hindu employee has stood up against it because most of them are on temporary visas, right? They're afraid. But even the permanent employees haven't challenged it. But we haven't seen rampant reporting on caste discrimination in these companies, since they passed it. Same thing with CSUs, 20, California State Universities, 23 campuses. They added caste as protected category. We haven't seen the reports.
No.
They are publishing reports on, whatever happens on campus. There is
Yeah.
no caste. So it's like you said, it's just a political game. It is just to malign a community for
The
for
success they've
for
been having.
standing. Well, no, we actually more than that, for celebrating and practicing American Canadian traditions and values. We are being punished for it.
Yes, yes. All right, so that was great discussion. Let me. This really, really, you brought out some excellent points. Uh, let, let, we're going to do one of these today. So I have a really good example to show you of this. And brought to you by American Hindus Against Defamation, AHAD, the Hindu hater of the week. So that you may or may not be surprised, but this one actually you might be surprised. Let me show you this. I was I don't it never ceases to amaze me as to why people do things that they do. So let me show you this news item and get your view on this. This is not the one. Where is it? Let's see. If I can only bring it up. Here we go. It always has to show the ad first, huh? Uh, so this is in Mumbai, my
Oh.
hometown,
Mhm.
and yesterday was Bakri Eid. This is the Eid. Uh, it's also called Eid al Adha, and a lot of animals are sacrificed during this Eid. And this person uh, painted the word Sri Ram on a goat, and he sacrificed it.
It's horrific. But I want to say they are always the whoever does it is trying to trigger the Hindu community to outrage.
Yeah,
And I mean, of course, we are outraged, but that doesn't mean we start burning up our cities and going on a killing spree. We don't do that,
yeah,
right? We are outraged, and that's it.
yeah,
But this is extremely communal, and and especially on a holy day, it's a holy festival. Why would someone go out of their way to abuse another community when they are celebrating something in their own faith?
yeah.
I don't understand that.
So I think because and people say that India has become a country where 200 million Muslims are in imminent danger of genocide and things like that. This does not uh, show a community that lives in fear of majority.
No.
This does not show that anyone is intimidated, and this is not a sign of an impending genocide. This is a sign of a community that is, that thinks that what they had for 700 years will of rule over the majority is soon to come. It's only a matter of time. That is the signal.
I agree, and it's a scary thought because that'll be the end of Hindus. That'll
Yeah,
be the end of Hindus.
I mean,
Even though we struggled for all these 700 years, this kind of attitude that still continues in a country where they have all the freedoms versus the neighboring countries where minorities have
have
they
been
cannot
wiped
even
off.
vote.
Have been
Yeah,
wiped off.
yes, wiped off. And whereas the minorities in India, don't want to call them minorities. I want to call them the global majorities who happen to live and practice their faith in India. They're not minorities, they are
Yeah,
global majorities. And so it's unfortunate. I'm sad that this happened, especially on a holy festival.
yeah,
That is unforgivable, I have to say.
yeah. Well, Sudha, thank you very much. It was a great show. I think we had a good discussion. We have not heard the last of the Canadian proposal that has been floated in their parliament. I think we will hear more of it as the time goes on. We'll also bring on our Canadian friends to opine on what is happening over there, and to give us some reports as time goes on. But till then, see you next week. It was great. Thank you. Once
Thank you.
again,
Good
this
night.
is Hindu Lounge. Hindu Lounge is brought to you by Hindu Pact. Hindu Pact is Hindu Policy Research and Advocacy Collective. It is an initiative of VHPA, or World Hindu Council of America, with Sudha Jagannathan. I am Ajay Shah, and we will see you next week. Thank you for joining. Namaste.